Today I'm today I'm going to talk about Beethoven, who is a famous deaf German composer and pianist. Ludwig van Beethoven was born December 17th, 1770, and died March 16th, 1827. He is one of the most famous composers in orchestra to this day, best known being 9 symphonies, 5 piano concertos, 1 violin concerto, 32 piano sonatas, and 16 string quartets. He also created an opera called Fidelio. Beethoven was born in the capital of the Electorate of Cologne at the time in a city called Bonn. He had a musical talent at an early age and was taught mostly by his father, who was a composer and conductor, and he also studied composition with Joseph Haydn. At 21, Beethoven moved to Vienna, where he began studying music composition. He then gained reputation as an accomplished and versatile pianist, and some people called him a virtuoso. Beethoven's loss of hearing. Beethoven supposedly lost his hearing after an attack he had in 1798, brought on by a rage because his work was interrupted. He explained that he had fallen over, and when he came to, he was deaf. Beethoven's hearing only partially recovered, but then declined again. In 1801, he started to write friends explaining how becoming deaf created difficulties in his professional and personal life. The cause of his deafness is not known, but is believed to have been caused by typhus or some kind of autoimmune disorder. Beethoven's autopsy after death explained he had a distended inner ear which grew lesions over time. Beethoven was told by his doctor then to move out of Vienna in 1802 to come to terms with his disability. So he moved to a small town outside of Vienna called Heiligenstadt. There he became very depressed and wrote the Heiligenstadt Testament. The Heiligenstadt Testament was a letter to his brother entailing his thoughts of suicide due to his deafness, and tells about his inspiration to live and continue his art. Beethoven's hearing loss became worse, and by the premiere of his Ninth Symphony in 1824, he had to be turned around to see the people applauding because he couldn't hear them or the orchestra at all. Beethoven's hearing loss did not stop him from composing music, but it made it increasingly difficult to play at concerts, which was one of his major sources of income. Beethoven didn't experience the loss of hearing until his 30s. By that time, he was more than well acquainted with the sound of orchestra or a string quartet. After a failed attempt to perform a piano concerto number 5, The Emperor, he never performed in public again. Until 1824, he directed the premiere of his Ninth Symphony, in which he gave cues to the conductor Michael Umlauf. Beethoven had a collection of antique hearing aids that can still be seen at the Beethoven House Museum in his hometown of Bonn, Germany. His conversation books are some of the most interesting views into his life. He had to use the books in his last 10 years or so. That way he would know what his friends were saying, and then he would respond orally or write his response in the book. The books discuss music and give light to Beethoven's thought processes. For example, how he intended his music to be performed and perception in relation to his art. There were over 400 books, but 246 of them were said to be destroyed by his secretary for the reason that he wanted only an idealized biography of Beethoven to survive. In 1824, with failing health, Beethoven began the last quartets. The last quartets went far beyond what musicians and audiences were ready for at the time. Beethoven's illness and death. By 1825, he was bedridden and remained ill for about a month, with episodes of diarrhea and vomiting that nearly ended his life. Shortly after completing the 13th Quartet, Beethoven became extremely ill again. In the remaining months of 1826, he was bedridden once more. Many friends and family were said to have visited, and he died on March 26 at 56 years old during a thunderstorm. Autopsy of Beethoven revealed extreme liver damage, perhaps caused by heavy drinking. Beethoven's funeral was said to be attended by over 20,000 people from Vienna. Remains were exhumed in 1862 for study and then moved again in 1888 back to Vienna. There is an argument about Beethoven's cause of death. People propose cirrhosis of the liver, syphilis, hepatitis, and Whipple's disease. Beethoven composed in several genres of music and is renowned the world over in depth. His most famous work includes 32 piano sonatas, 9 symphonies, an opera, and 2 masses of shorter works, along with his composing for other artists. He also wrote a large amount of chamber music, in addition to 16 string quartets. Beethoven has also been the subject of many biographical films. He has a monument called the Beethoven Monument in his hometown of Bonn, Germany, that was erected in 1845. He also has the Beethoven House, which is a museum in Bonn dedicated to his life and his musical career. There is also a yearly festival celebrating him in Bonn every year. Beethoven was a famous composer that kept creating and playing his works after becoming completely deaf, and that is a lesson of ambition and strength. He is one of the famous people who didn't let disability stop them from doing what he loved. Also, Beethoven was very depressed, having faced a hard childhood and a life full of disappointments. Beethoven did not let his depression transpire through his music and left us with a treasure of musical compositions that will last a lifetime because he did not give up.